Welcome to the VLGA Connect Governance Update for State Budget Week. And Steve Cooper, I think he was a bit concerned about what was coming out of the budget because he left the state. Steve, where are you this morning?
Chris, I'm in beautiful downtown Hobart. Actually, I decided to duck inside in Waterman's Hotel, and they've fed me and given me coffee, and provided me with Wi-Fi. So it's a good place to be.
Excellent. And I imagine it's a little bit nippy outside.
Well, Chris, if I can play show and tell for a minute, it was meant to be 5 degrees overnight. So a Carrie's beanie, but just buy a beanie for a good charity, and you need your gloves as well. So, but it's warming up now. It's going to be a beautiful day in Hobart. And can I actually say the place is just bristling with confidence?
I don't know why.
Well, apparently in the last week, any empty shops have filled up. The confidence of the council staff is booming, and the the digital transformation program at the council's kicked on as well, all in a week.
Now, that wouldn't have anything to do with our Kelly Grigsby going down there and taking over as of, I think, last week.
I might have gilded the lily a bit, Chris, but you and I know that Kelly Grigsby is a very talented CEO. So all of those things, if they haven't happened already, will happen, I'm sure.
Kelly, if you're watching, and I do notice there is some Hobart listenership and downloading of this program. If it's you, Kelly, we miss you, but good luck. I hope Steve Cooper gave you a call to request permission to enter the territory.
Well, someone did tell me yesterday, Chris, that mainlanders need a passport to get into Hobart. So.
I'm sure yours is up to date. Now, the big news this week, other than the state budget, which we'll come to, Steve, is the release of a Victorian Ombudsman's report. Deborah Glass has looked at how the councils across the state have administered financial hardship policies, and it's been a real mixed scorecard, hasn't it?
A salutary reminder, Chris. Obviously, I mean, financial hardship is typically around rates, and yes, the Ombudsman did give a mixed scorecard. I thought the really interesting part of that report, Chris, was that there was a reminder that the word may is a Latin word, which means be a good idea to have a policy.
Yes.
Yes.
And so, because I did notice one of her recommendations was to require councils to have a hardship policy. And I must admit that surprised me, because I thought, and it might be because of the subtlety of the wording, I thought councils did have to have one already. So there you go. I learned something.
Yeah, it's an interesting one too, though, Chris. Is in a sense it goes beyond hardship, because it's a reminder that, and I'll get the words wrong, but that we're still in the 1989 Act in relation to rates and charges, but the council may waive interest, or either generally or specifically. And so not uncommon, for example, for councils in a drought or natural disaster to waive those sorts of charges more generally. It becomes more interesting, though, where there are specific requests for waiver of interest, and councils really needing to have a fair and consistent approach.
And I did notice also a comment from the Ombudsman that, waiving of rates should happen only rarely, and that discretion should be, I think the quote was, discretion should be the order of the day. Because there were some examples where, at face value, without digging into the detail, there did seem to be some pretty unfair sort of outcomes, didn't there?
I think, and look, my take, Chris, would be that for the most part, councils get it right. It's not uncommon, for example, and we talk about, the asset-rich, cash-poor class of people, and many of the elderly citizens, for example, might be sitting on properties where they can't afford to pay the rates, and it is not unusual for councils just to defer payment, allow the rates and interest to accrue. That's all a charge on the property. You know that the council will collect those funds at some point when the person dies. That's reasonably well understood. It becomes more interesting digging into the detail of when should a council actually waive the interest charge. And I was a bit interested in a comment that the Ombudsman's report made, where it talked about the fact that the interest payments are a punishment for not paying the rates on time. And I must admit, I sort of did a bit of a double take at that, because whilst for the person concerned it's certainly a punishment, I would hope that council officers in enforcing these policies, if there is a policy, would see that the interest is actually a disincentive for non-payment, which is a quite different mindset.
Absolutely. Yeah, couldn't agree more. Steve, I think we should point out that the Ombudsman is coming on VLGA Connect next week and Catherine Arndt is joining in that discussion, and we'll be able to explore those issues, I think, in far finer detail at that time.
Look forward to seeing that, Chris. It'll be a really interesting discussion, and there's a lot of nuance around what does fairness look like and what are the points at which those discussions should be applied. So I look forward to it.
All right, thanks for that, Steve. And of course, the report is online if anyone wants to have a look at that in the meantime. We do have some senior appointment news which we'll save to the end. It is State Budget Week, and you and the VLGA team, particularly, can I say good morning and thank you to Deborah Wu, have done a power of work going over the papers and the announcements to see what it means for local government. What's the headline, do you think, from your perspective?
Oh, look, I think there's a few of them, Chris. The continuation of the Growing Suburbs Fund, $50 million in 21-22. Expansion of the regional and metropolitan partnerships program. You're quite familiar with those programs. $55 million of investment in community sport infrastructure and $10 million for female-friendly facilities. So some important things there. I think there's some other ones that go outside the sector but also look to our partnerships with other agencies, or where local government might not quite be the lead agency, but a $3.8 billion investment in reforming mental health following the Royal Commission.
That is massive. We spoke to Angus Cleland about that on a special VLGA Connect last week. He described it as a generational shift in the approach to the issue. When coupled with the investment that's coming in the federal budget, it really is going to be a major shift in the approach. And there's a lot in there actually for councils, Steve. There's these new collectives that'll be funded in each LGA. There'll be a lot more partnerships I think you'll see happening around, things like headspace type approach to facilities. So big news in that space.
I think you're right, Chris. There's certainly been a recurring theme through that budget of local action, possibly in response to COVID and these sorts of issues. As a side one, Chris, I was quite interested in the dynamic too, that there are specific taxes that have been quarantined, if you like. There's another word for it that's just eluded me at the moment. Hypothecated for mental health services, and it's a reminder, and it's probably a useful kind of introduction to that discussion around tax, that in fact taxes are sometimes necessary, or in fact necessary for a civil society. And this one's a reminder where a particular tax is being applied to mental health.
It'd be interesting to see where the multidisciplinary community-based hubs are going to be located. That's another thing we spoke to Angus about. 5 or so each year for the next 5 years or so. Some have been announced, some yet to be announced. I imagine there's work being done behind the scenes to work out where the priorities there are for those.
I think council planning teams are going to be quite busy at that strategic end around the placement of those. Also, obviously, there's a big investment in housing, Chris, and that will have a similar implication.
Gender equality has been given quite a bit of attention in this budget too, Steve.
Yeah, $4.3 million for a gender equality responsive budget unit. And there's obviously a lot of work being done across all levels of government about the implementation of the Gender Equality Act. So having supports in place for that implementation, so it's embedded rather than being just a compliance burden, I think is really important.
And nearly $2 million for a Women in Local Government Community Leadership Training Program. I think 120 women will be funded to participate in this program, which is supporting their pathways towards the next council elections in 2024.
Yeah, and much applauded. One of the points of that, though, Chris, is if you work through the sort of proportion of candidates to the proportion elected, and that's a pretty simple metric. We need something like 1,000 female candidates to stand to get the 50% necessary to reach that target. So as much work as possible that can be done early in supporting women into leadership positions, particularly locally, is welcomed.
Absolutely. A couple of the big wins for some specific councils that might be worth mentioning. Glenelg Shire, $17 million for an employment fund. Latrobe City, $10 million for new jobs in the Latrobe Valley. And of course, we know over time that area is going through massive economic restructure because of the change there with industry. And Central Goldfields, nearly $100 million for a new building at the Maryborough Hospital, works to happen next year. They'd be very excited about that announcement.
I think so. And there's also some economic development initiatives for Central Goldfields as well, with a campaign to promote jobs and opportunities in the region. And I know, having done some work at Central Goldfields, there's really an untapped resource there, because people think of Bendigo and Ballarat as the gold cities. But in fact, it's around Maryborough and Denali that is really at the heart of that historical gold digging.
And what a delightful place to spend a bit of time in Maryborough. I've been there a couple of times in recent times, and reminded me what a lovely little place it is.
If anyone hasn't been to the Maryborough station, put it on your list. It is an extraordinary site. So
and more reason to do so coming, because I think there's a project there to have a living museum project set up there, which has been funded recently as well. So keep an eye on that. Libraries haven't missed out, nearly $10 million for the Public Libraries Fund, Steve, and the Growing Suburbs Fund, which is about those big interface councils, particularly where all the growth is happening. Another $50 million in that fund.
Yeah. Yep. And Chris, emergency management, a significant investment, nearly $800 million for bushfire recovery, over $100 million for case support, financial counselling, mental health, etc. $4 million for school and early childhood services in affected areas, nearly $30 million for emergency management facility upgrades. And I know in some areas, the quality of SES facilities has been a bit of an issue, and almost $400 million to reduce bushfire risk and a Safer Together strategy. So a big investment in emergency management, quite rightly.
So much in there. I see the metropolitan partnerships are going to continue, and the regional partnerships are going to continue with $16 million provided to continue the work that they are doing. So look, Steve, we can't read every line of the budget. These are just the ones that we think touch on or affect local government. There are plenty more. And of course, we encourage people to dig a bit deeper if they want to know exactly what's in it for their areas.
Sounds like a good plan, Chris. Yes.
Now, before we wrap up, I do want to pay tribute to another CEO who has indicated this week that they're going to leave the sector. Helen Morrissey, who's been around the sector for a long time, has been the CEO of Brimbank since 2017, is retiring in another month or so. She's going to be greatly missed. I've got to say, worked closely with Helen for quite some time. She's a terrific CEO, lovely person, and I know she's really looking forward to having more time to spend with the grandkids.
Chris, I endorse everything that you've said. I've been lucky enough to do some work with Helen over the years, and obviously agree with you completely, but sadly she does barrack for Collingwood, and
yes,
I'm sorry, I can't get over that.
I'm not sure I knew that. I'm just sort of reassess.
I am gobsmacked that you didn't know it.
I did. I've just tried very hard not to hold it against
just
her.
Put it aside. Yeah.
For our interstate listeners, there's also been a general manager appointment announced this week at Wingecarribee. Now, Wingecarribee's gone through a lot in recent times. The council's been removed. There's an interim administrator who's doing a lot of work to get things on, what he would call an even keel. And he's appointed a new general manager in Lisa Miss Campbell. I knew I was going to say Miss Campbell. Yep, Miss Campbell, who is coming to head up that Shire Council very soon.
Yeah, and highly respected administrator Viv May, the former general manager of Mossman City Council. I've got a sense, though, Chris, that Wingecarribee is a bit like Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, that you actually quite like saying it.
I do. It's a fun word. It just rolls off the tongue. So Miss Campbell will start at Wingecarribee on the 21st of June. And she's coming from Hunters Hill Council, where she's been general manager there for a while. Anything else to share with us, Steve, before we wrap up?
I think our work's nearly done. I've got to go and look at some art galleries and architecture and so on over the next few days. So, no, I think our work's done today.
Enjoy your time in Hobart. Ms. Grigsby knows you're there now, so look out. They'll be making sure that you're putting money in the parking meter or whatever it is you're supposed to do. All the best.
I will be very corporate and obey all the local laws. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Steve. Always good to talk. Steve Cooper, Chief of Staff at the VLGA, for the governance update, and we'll see you again next week. Bye for now.